So I'm Art Noxon, and I have the two traps, and we're going to talk about setting up rooms. And the name of the talk that was advertised isn't the real talk. The real talk is the secrets of setting up rooms. And so I'm going to share those secrets after really about 35 years of working for Golden Ears, Audiophile, and learning about how they like rooms to be set up, combined with the skills and techniques of acoustic engineering that I am. Okie doke. So I made some notes, so I'll probably refer to them so I don't get too far off track too quickly. Let's start simply. It'll actually all be simple, no equations. In the beginning, I know there's dipole speakers and dynamic speakers. We're going to talk mostly about dynamic speakers, but we'll include the dipole speaker in places where it's appropriate, and you'll see when it is because of how it works. And so we'll start off with dynamic speakers. And then there's always the listening position, the sweet spot, the money spot, or whatever you want to call it. And so that's basically a listening footprint. No news there. And then we have a room. And the goal is to put this thing in the box. And he said, well, how could that be hard? Well, I mean, that's what the talk's about, how hard it is, or how easy it is, how much fun you can have doing it, and how much resources you have laying around your house that you don't even know is a resource. Because most of what we do is take advantage of how the room is actually set up. And the first thing we mentioned that I do when someone sends me photos and a floor plan and says, hey, help me out, I say, okay, so the first thing I do is I look at the existing floor plan. Almost exactly half of the existing floor plans that come to me, the room is being played sideways or backwards. Okay, there's only one way to drive a car, right? Forward. You can't drive it sideways, and even backwards isn't all that hot either. But the audiophile people, and love them, but they're setting rooms up sideways and backwards. A room has a natural, usually, if you study it, it has a natural way to be played. It has a sonic stage somewhere in that room. It's got the hall somewhere in the room. It's got the natural bass traps or bass vents, which you'll find out about somewhere in the room. And it's just that the person putting the room together is looking at it visually. They start off with a picture window, and it's beautiful. I paid a lot of money to get that picture window, looking out over the golf course or whatever it's going to be. And then they put a speaker over here, the speaker over here. Boy, that's looking really good. I mean, that could be a photo in a hi-fi magazine, right? Either side of the fireplace, looking really good. But they're not setting the room up with their ears. They're setting the room up with their eyes. And we're golden ears here, okay? Not golden eyes. And it's not about how it looks. It's always about how it sounds. If it sounds good, great. If it doesn't sound good, oh, now what? Okay? And so sounding good is what drives room acoustics and putting this thing in that thing. Okay? Sounding good. Not looking good. Now, I know sometimes things have to look good, okay? Otherwise, you're not going to have this in that room unless it looks good for whatever reason, because there's more than one boss in the house.
There's only one boss.
Only one boss, yeah. I know that. And so sometimes we have to do things to allow this footprint to be placed in this room in some cattywampus condition, sonically, but visually wonderful. But you have to fix the problem that's induced into the sound stage and into the listening dynamics of listening when this is misplaced in the room. We'll go through that. Okay. So I just wanted to crack a joke about like what drives the physical setup of half at least of the hi-fi rooms. It's a visual call. And so, okay, with that, we'll move on to something else. Okay. So let's go back to the speaker itself. Dynamic speaker, dipole speaker. Okay, so I'm not saying anything new. The here's the piano keyboard, middle C, treble, bass. That's the portable spectrum analyzer we all carry around with us just because we grew up in a world where the piano keyboard has been around us for a long time. So I like to talk about and reference everything to the keyboard because it's pretty much divided. It naturally divides. It's not only the bass clef, these are all the long wavelengths and these are all the short wavelengths. And the short wavelengths ricochet around the room, point, 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 kind of with mirrors and the way everybody thinks acoustics works. And it's a fun way. Ray tracing is what it's called. And even computers can do it, which is like really wonderful. And you can probably download a program for free, and you can put a mirror on the wall and shine a flashlight. And, it's all fun. Ray tracing. But that only works in the treble range, the upper half of the keyboard. In the lower half, all bets are off. It doesn't work that way at all. Never did, never will, which is a little bit of a problem. What does it act like? After 35 years of wrestling with the monster in the room, it acts like water. It just goes wherever there's room for it to go. Okay? It just doesn't, if you want a technical term for it, it's extremely diffusive. It bends around a corner, no problem. High frequencies, not so diffusive. If there's a corner there, these high frequencies just keep on going past the corner. That's about, they don't care about there was a corner there. Bass wraps around the corner. It spreads. It fills corners. It goes into closets. It sneaks out of doors. It goes through windows. It just oozes. And so the way you think of bass in order to be successful at wrestling with it is to remember it's like an octopus, like everything's going in all directions at the same time. You can barely keep track of it. This is simple. It's like somebody throws a ball at you and you catch it. It's right, literal. Okay? So that's why the world of bass is different from the world of treble. Is this about the wavelength relative to the geometry of the space the wavelength is in? So if you have giant buildings, then bass acts like treble. If you have short little toy things, teeny, then treble acts like bass, right? It's all wavelength dependent on the geometry of the environment that the wave is in. But for rooms, I've kind of explained it. Okay, bass goes, this is a point source, and bass expands evenly in all directions away from a dynamic speaker. The treble kind of has a expansion pattern that kind of looks like this. It kind of basically plays forward. It's called a cardioid pattern, roughly speaking. And the body of the box tends to cast an acoustic shadow on the front wall of the room, generally of the tweeter. Okay, with dipoles, it's bass in this direction and treble, and bass in this direction and treble. This bass might be in one phase, and this bass will be out of phase. In other words, this thing's jumping back and forth, and when this pushes back, it creates a pressure wave going this way, it creates a suction wave going that way. So it's out of phase. Whereas this one, when it goes back and forth, it creates a pressure wave going that way, or in high frequencies, a pressure wave going that way. So and you guys all know that. Yeah.
So do you think, given this expansion of the bass with 360 degrees pattern, do you think there's value of having a stereo bass system with two subs as opposed to just one?
I'm sorry, could you?
Okay, what he's asking is stereo bass versus Mono bass. Okay, so normally for people who do not have unlimited budgets and don't own Wilsons with subwoofers, okay, just to make sure you've got every little ounce of sound out of it. Yet, the recording engineers always mix bass mono because they want both amps and both pistons working at the same time, because no one can own enough power to actually develop bass in the bottom end on the right channel all by itself or on the left channel all by itself. Okay, long time ago they made that decision, and still the rule of thumb. Now it's possible for somebody to say right channel bass, but then you only have half as much power. The other one's sitting there, cooling off. You can't tell the direction the bass is coming from, but you can feel, if it's really powerful, the direction the air is moving, and that goes with the bass. You can hear the upper partials that cue you to where the bass comes from. So you can have a mono bass and stereo upper partials, which is what happens with crossovers.
What are they using in the recording when you say bass? 250 or lower?
No. Bass, below 80.
Below 80. Middle C is in what? I forgot.
It's 260 hertz. It's a 4-foot wavelength. It's the middle of the piano keyboard. I think it's called C3.
Has the standard of mixing mono bass remained with digital recording?
Yeah, because it's not about digital
Right.
at all. It's about power.
At one time, there was an issue with trackability, but
Well, yeah,
which has gone away.
the needles would jump out of the
Right. Yeah.
at any rate. Okay, so let's move on. But it's important to know the distribution pattern of bass, of dynamics and treble. Let's go backwards one. Notice that there is no distribution of sound sideways with the dynamic. And the dynamic becomes a lifesaver in certain rooms when when this is what's out of control. Right? In other words, in the plane of the speaker, if the room's out of control and you can't afford to fix it, sell your dynamics, buy dipoles. Okay, you'll enjoy the change, great speakers, and you'll get out of all kinds of hot water, except at home because they're visual and they're big. Okay, but we'll cover this a little bit more, but I couldn't resist. Okay, Hi-Fi was born in New York City long ago, and how rooms look like in New York City long ago kind of look like that, and then there's a window and a window and kind of like San Francisco. And then there's maybe a parlor doors, and there might be a fireplace, and then it comes in the back, and there's a set of doors or sliders, whatever, in the back, and there's a dining room back here. And they put the speaker here because the view is beautiful, the speaker here because the view is beautiful, and they sit there. And they got great sound, okay? Hi-Fi was hatched out of that space. And because that's the standard living environment for, people, and on average. Okay, this has so many wonderful things in it that we'll find out when it comes to normal houses built by regular contractors with tool belts and screw guns and stuff that of today. This we'll see how beautiful this is. But let me throw some ideas out. Number one, it's lath and plaster. What's that? Okay, sand on the walls. You ever jog through the sand? Yeah, once or twice. Younger, maybe. Okay, a lot of friction in sand, right? Lath and plaster walls, you've got sand glued to the walls and glued to the ceiling. Anytime those walls want to move, they have to, A, they're heavy, very, very heavy. B, they crunch because the sand in it is working with all the horsehair and everything else that's in lath and plaster. No one can even afford to buy lath and plaster. And I'm not talking about modern plaster with blue board and a bunch of holes in it and plaster coating, because that is not sand. They might have a sand coat, but that's not the sand in lath and plaster. those walls are very, very mechanically stable. They don't vibrate, they don't shudder. When the Wilsons open up their bottom end, those walls just kind of stay there and they'll work a little bit, but they don't vibrate anything like West Coast, wham bam, thank you ma'am, wood studs, metal studs, sheetrock, half-inch sheetrock on either side of the wall, kind of construction that we're stuck with. Lath and plaster is beautiful, acoustically, calm, inert, non-tympanic. Okay, here's the second thing. The wavefront comes out of this, it gets divided, part of it circulates around, circulating sound, tumbling bass disappears very quickly. The bass wavefront continues to expand, rattles these doors a little bit, some bass leaks out there. The bass wave continues to expand, goes up the chimney, nice bass vent there. Bass continues to expand, whoop, skips right out through the venting, through the doors, into the dining room. So the guy sitting here, does he have any phase, add, cancel, rear wall bounce? No, it vented out. What about reverberation and ambience and all these nice things? Well, it's all developed in here and fed back through the doors. These doors are kind of like ambient control, right? How loud do you want the ambience? Open the doors. Oh, it's a little too loud, close them up a little bit. And so, I mean, there's so many cool things about this room. But we don't have it, so we're not going to work with them. Now, in San Francisco, they do exist still, okay? And so setting them up this way and playing them this way is a very fun thing. Might have been the topic of my conversation, but what isn't? Okay, so let's talk about the first thing. We have different parts of the room. We've got the back of the room, and we've got the front of the room. And then we got the sides. And we got the roof and the floor. And, which I'll only speak lightly of. And, okay, so we're going to start at the back of the room. Our speakers develop a huge pressure. That pressure wave rips through down the length of the room, 1,000 feet a second, hits the rear wall, rams back the front, hits the front wall, rams back. My gosh, okay? So we don't want that, okay? We want to hear it once and we've heard enough, okay? If we hear it anymore, it begins to blur what's called dynamic blur. In other words, the sound, it creates a sound and then the sound stops, but does the sound in the room stop? No, it just keeps on humming away. So instead of bop, 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 musical moments, it goes blah, 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 the room is shuddering. And it's either mechanically shuddering because we've got giant picture window rattling, vibrating, or it's sonically shuddering end to end. So we got to dump the bass at the back of the room. Okay, so let's work on the back of the room. It's easy and fun. Speaker, listener. Okay. All we're talking about is the back of the room. We're not worried about the front of the room. We'll worry about that later. So what's the first thing to do? Well, the least expensive thing to do and the most wonderful thing to do is to have something like this at the back of the room. The bass wave comes down, it starts to pile up a little bit here, it starts to pile up a little bit here, and it vents. It vents. Sound is two things, not one thing. We think, because we have ears, we imagine and act like we believe that sound is pressure. Sound pressure meter, pressure, 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 pressure. Am I being sarcastic? Yes. Okay, there's a hidden partner to sound. The hidden partner is kinetic energy, air movement. So this is what a sound wave looks like when it's going by you. I know I lost that. Is moving forwards towards you. Then expanded air pulls back. Compressed air goes forward, expanded air goes back. You know how much energy, what the energy density division between potential energy, pressure, and kinetic energy, motion? You know what that energy division is? As in all waves? Ocean waves, light waves, sound waves, 50-50. Half of the energy is motion. Half of the energy is pressure. All waves belong to the same set of laws, if you want to look at it that way. They all follow the same style of behavior. Now, the kinetic energy part we can't hear. But when kinetic energy, when a wave comes in and is coming this way, it's got pressure, but the air molecules, now the air molecules, I mean, look at how much a subwoofer is displaced, okay? I know Wilson's, they'll push 3/4 of an inch of air, maybe an inch forward, and then suck it back another inch. Okay, that's great. It's only an inch. And what frequency? 30 hertz. So you have a displacement of an inch over 30 hertz. The velocity is something like, I don't know, 3 feet a second. It's not much. Air motion, the speed of the air motion is not fast. It's slow. The speed of sound, the speed of the effect ripples through the air very quickly. Might be the wrong word to use. Okay, so, but a sound wave is coming up to this wall. We have pressure, and the wall experiences increasing pressure, and we have air movement. This big slab of air is going bam. And when it hits this wall, the kinetic energy converts to pressure, right? It's like a football player. And then it springs back, because air is a nicely springy material, then it springs back and turns into a normal sound wave again. But at the wall, the kinetic energy went to zero and became pressure, momentum, stop, impulse, and then it springs off the wall and becomes a normal sound wave again. So what we want to do when the bass wave hits the rear wall is we got to get rid of it somehow, because we don't want it to come back. The easiest way to get rid of it is to vent it, and so that's what these things are indicating, is that we start to build a little pressure, but then the bass just squirts out and then it sucks back in. So we just have vents at the back of the room, and that's really wonderful. Now I know everyone wants to listen with their doors closed because somebody's complaining about turning the bass down. And that's, okay, well, can deal with that, it's going to cost you. Okay? But if you just can have bass vents, then it doesn't cost you. Okay, so that's the basic bass vent. So let's take a look at another kind of a bass vent. Here's an awful kind of a room in a way. Well, we don't care about the front of the room right now. I'm going to cross it out because it doesn't matter. But it's, we've got a hallway here and a hallway here. This could be an opening to a family room. This could be the entrance into the house. This could be the kitchen or something like that. But when you look at it, what is this? Giant bass vent. Bass can depressurize. Oh yeah, it's going to pressurize and build up a little bit here, hit and spring back, but it's going to bleed off to the side because there's nothing in the way of it. One of the amazing things to me was to find out that the direction of a sound wave, how do you know what the direction of a sound wave is? You know the speed of it. Well, how do you know what direction it's going?
Positive or negative?
Positive or negative? Okay, that's a good way to look at it. Okay,
Front
The
or
direction
going
where
forward or back?
yes, it's the direction that the air is moving. The sound wave is always pointed in the direction the air is moving. And the energy in the sound wave, the energy of the sound is in the sound wave, and it's traveling in the direction that the air is sloshing. And that's why a vent is so cool, because the energy density in the sound is being driven or leaked out of the room.
So this is a good room or this is a bad room?
Good room.
This is a good room.
Because it's the bass can vent out of the room. The energy is being depleted out of the room. The sound wave itself, the bass wave, is traveling out of the room. It turns out of the room.
What if the speakers in the sitting area are reversed?
Then that's pretty horrible. We'll talk. Yeah, that's your room. We'll talk about that towards the end when we're talking about the front end of the room. Okay, and then but yes, you're right. That's awful, and it can even be worse than that if you have rooms that looks like that. Now this speaker is venting, and this one's playing in a hard corner, so pretty awful. Okay, but let's get back to the.
So in a room like that, if the front wall had windows, would you recommend opening those to act as vents for?
Well, we're jumping ahead, and so
Yeah, you don't want.
windows are dangerous because you don't want to. I'm jumping ahead. You suckered me a little bit, but you don't want to reduce the pressure at the launching point. The front third of the room has nothing to do with the back of the room. The front third is its own animal. It has to be looked at from its own. The dynamics of what's going on in the front third of the room has nothing to do, almost nothing to do with what's going on at the back. What's going on at the back of the room is the wave front is flat and hitting the rear wall practically all at once, and then it boom bounces straight back. Okay, it's a flat wave front, flat. Very different than in the front of the room where the sound's going in all different directions at the same time. Completely different. This is like a mix master in the front of the room, and it's just a simple rear wall bounce in the back.
But that's a room that doesn't have like any couches or anything back there blocking the wave. So that's like, this room's open all the way to the back. But if you have couches, you have furniture and everything like that, that's going to deflect the wave also.
You think a 30-foot dinosaur cares about your little couch?
That's what you got.
There's a little bit of bass absorption in a couch, but don't get married to the idea that a couch from some couch store is a bass trap. It's not. There's a lot of fiber there, but the bass wave will go right over it. It doesn't even see it. Remember, it's all about wavelength, and unless you got a huge couch, okay, it's not even gonna. It's just gonna. When bass runs into pressure, what's beautiful about it is it just converts. It just turns into kinetic energy and whoop, skips around it, reforms on the other side, and keeps going.
It's like water going over the couch.
I told you. Okay, it is not like high frequencies where sound goes around the room and runs into things and crashes and disappears, which is in the couch.
So basically, stereo subs is a waste of money.
No, it's twice as many subs. It's not a stereo sub. You never buy a stereo sub. I mean, you can call it that, but it's not stereo. It's mono, and you got 2 drivers. You can have 6 drivers if you want. They're all working in unison. No, aren't going different from each other. Okay, so now let's talk about more complicated rooms. We don't really care about the front of the room anyway. Okay. So what happens in this situation? A door here, and we've got a wall there. And the bass wave is coming down, ripping down. It vents here, if you can leave the door open. But what happens here? Boom, comes back. Okay, so this is asymmetric, right? It's vented on one side, good riddance. This side, oh no. Now you have to go buy a bass trap or buy a bass trap, but you have to basically, come up with something that acts like a vent. And a bass trap also, it doesn't vent the sound, it simply absorbs it depending on its frequency response. But the bottom line is, the wavefront that comes back looks like, because let's say it's play like it's the same as a vent, okay, because the energy still disappeared. What comes back is something like this. What went in is a flat wavefront. What comes out is a wavefront that's bent because this part of this pressure wavefront got bled off, and what you're left with is a rounded bass wavefront, as if you hit a bass diffuser. And everyone loves diffusers, don't we? We've been trained to. And so it's if it's a bass diffuser. But the reason it's not flat is because you're bleeding energy off of either side of this giant flat wavefront, and so it ends up getting weak on either side. Now, I'm going to diverge a little bit. Okay, so what's kind of cool about that? A, it's weaker at the listening chair. Thank goodness, okay, less phase add cancel, less whining about 50 hertz cut, whatever it's going to be, okay, which is legitimate. Okay, so I'm not knocking it. But here's another thing that's good about it. When I'm a bass wave, compressed air, I push on this wall, I spring back, it's a perfect 100% elastic bounce. The nice thick wall, strong brick concrete wall, well-built condo, and I spring off that wall, and the energy that went into the wall and the energy that came off the wall's the same. That's no fun. Okay, now take this bass wave into account. Bass wave coming at the wall like this. We still have compressed air, but now we have compressed air that's rubbing on the wall. That's kind of like sandpaper now, because the air motion, the movement of the air, it still is moving. Right here, the air motion goes to zero. But when the wave comes in at an angle, there's air motion on the wall, and now you have compressed air rubbing on the wall and rarefied air rubbing on the wall. But the thing is you have friction, and lots of friction, and that friction absorbs the energy out of the bass wave real easily, very quickly. And so if we can convert a flat wave front, which is what it looks like by the time it gets to the back wall, into a curved wave front where it's traveling in all different directions, the energy is going to get eroded out of the room fairly quickly. So not only did we get some venting, but what bounced back is coming at this wall at an angle where it's sandpapering the wall and energy's being lost. And so circulating bass always dies out faster than square to the wall bass. Okay? And that's a big deal. And because you don't have to pay for this, you already own it. Especially when it's rubbing itself to death on the carpet. It's really nice. Okay? So you own that bass trap. But in order to get this bass trap to work, you have to bend the bass wave. And it comes in flat, and you have to mess with it in order to get it to bend so that it will rub on the walls, floor, and ceiling. Okay? So it's a free bass trap. You own it. It's in your house. You can change its coefficient of friction by adding sand and repainting it. Don't do gloss paint, do matte finish paint. I mean, there's all kinds of little tricks to absorb bass energy, but you got to get it angling into the wall. It's not square bass, and you can't absorb it at the wall. Okay, so is that scrambled up enough? You're supposed to know what that means, only after the fact. Okay, so sometimes, particularly if the room's a little bit bigger, we have this situation. Okay, we've got a room. The door could even be up here. The problem is flat wave hitting the rear wall. The guy's got, you might have, bookshelves full of records. Lots of records, thousands of records, more. Too many records to store. Okay, think about this. Record rack, not rack, but bookcase. Now what happens? The bass wave comes ripping down the room. Part of it is absorbed because all these records have a surface area and there's a little bit of friction, and anyway, so there's a little bit of absorption here. And then what happens? The pressure goes, it slips, it vents, inside vents, and continues to come this way and this way, where it crashes together, and then it reflects and comes back out. Now, two things happen. One is we've got a lot of air sloshing around, and that's opportunity for friction. We've got air sloshing. The air comes in pressure right here. Too bad we don't have a door we could open and we could just vent the bass out like that. Okay, if we don't have a door, but we want to get rid of it, put a bass trap there. we don't want to buy a bass trap, then at least what we've done is we've disrupted, we've reflected this somewhat and absorbed it somewhat. Now we have a time-delayed return on this wavefront, and on same thing, time-delayed return on this front, and we've heavily distorted that wavefront. It's no longer flat. It comes, this part pops forward, this part, certain time delay comes scooting out of the sides on either side. It's all scrambled up again. We've bent, distorted the wavefront. We have created literally kind of like a giant RPG diffuser, only at one frequency, but like if that's the well, and this is the well, I mean, that's kind of what that system is about. Time delayed, phase, wavefront distortion. Well, here we did it with bass and bookshelf. Okay. You have bookshelves? Yeah. Full of records? Yeah. Very heavy, bass can't push a bookshelf around full of records, can you? You can't move it either. So let's take a look at the rear wall. We have a record shelf. Make it a little higher. Put a bass on top of it, some plans. Okay, the bass wave comes out like coming across like this at the speed of sound. Some of it hits this and kind of starts to reflect back, partially absorbed. What happens to the bass up here? It depressurizes, vents, comes down, hits the floor, comes back up, skids around again, and comes back in. The same thing happened sideways as what happened vertically, right? So what we're doing is we're using the natural inclination of bass waves to go around corners real easily to our advantage in trying to get the bass wave to circulate in the room instead of just crashing end to end, because there's no way you're going to control it without spending a ton of money.
So I have record shelving across the back of my room on the wall. From what I've been listening and hearing here, it sounds like I should have the records to the sides, to the corners, rather than kind of straight across and back. Does that make any sense? So in essence, that kind of the absorption you're talking about with the records would happen over
Yes.
towards each corner,
Yes.
rather than put them all the way across the back, put them to the corners.
And if you have room, move them up off the wall so you get a bleed into that tunnel.
Yeah, that I can't. They're bolted to the back.
Okay.
Wall.
So there's always difficulties with, but we're not here to exactly solve specific difficulties. We're here to learn about how bass waves behave in rooms and how you can trick them, train them to behave without spending money.
So you can have something like that back to the wall. You can put bass traps on the corners to get that bass in the corners.
If you had this on the rear wall, then yeah, you would. Then you put bass trap here and here, right? Or you have open a door here, and then you put one bass trap here because this is venting. I don't know where the door is.
On a 20,000 foot level, what are we trying to achieve? So we're talking we can do this to do this and do that. What overall, what's the goal?
The goal is to be able to generate bass and not have it turn into a standing wave end to end in the room. Because that creates that once that energy, it's so efficiently stored end to end, it lasts forever, sonically speaking. And you're trying to listen to music, and it played an eighth of a note, eighth of a second worth of bass tone, boom, but during that time, it filled the room up with a standing wave or a not standing wave. I mean, standing waves, everyone gets all excited because the standing wave modes. What about the frequencies that aren't standing waves? What about the frequencies that aren't modes? They don't exist? Excuse me, what did you say? They don't exist? Of course they exist. Any frequency you want to play exists. Not just modes. Modes is just a fraction of how the room stores energy. And yet, to read the literature out there and, you know, how to be a genius, no one even tells you what happens to the energy between the frequencies that the modes exist at. They talk about what happens in a mode, which is really cool, but what happens between modes? What happens between modes is the wave is disorganized. And there's a lot of rubbing on the surfaces, and that disorganized part of the wave, aspect of the wave, causes it to die out more quickly. The reason modes are awful, and we hear a lot about them and think that we're really smart when we calculate our modes, is that they last a long time. They last a lot longer than anything else because modes have, the standard is they have pressure on the wall. They're square to the walls. I know that there's 2 and 3 dimensional modes, but they basically are all square to the walls. And they're more efficiently stored in the room, and they last a lot longer.
So for a frequency that is a mode, there is a larger spatial distribution within the room, right? So sure, you can walk around and there would be spots that are quieter and some
Right,
spots.
hot spots. And
So, but for
both
frequencies that are not modes,
more uniform.
they are, okay, so it would follow like an inverse distance rule. The further you are from the source, the quieter they would get more uniformly as compared to, let's say, frequencies that have modes.
A mode has standing waves, and if you're small enough that you can walk around inside the modes without distorting the modes, don't forget, you know, you're this big, okay?
Right.
So a mode is going to glue itself to you because it can't go through you. That sound can't go through you. It's going to bounce off of you. And so when you walk around a room, you basically are, you know, kind of like a pillar that is creating modes if the frequency happens to be right. And if you create a set of modes where the wavelengths are all this far apart in a reverberant room, you can sit there and close your eyes, and someone can walk around the room, and guess what? You can hear them moving in the room. Not because you hear their shoes scuffling, but because as they move, the modes are slipping around, and all of a sudden you hear the loudness of the mode, and then you hear the cancel of the mode, and then you hear the loudness of the mode, depending on where they are in the room. And they don't have to be next to you. They can be at the other end of the room. The effect is a little less if they're farther away. But this coupling to the body of the mode, but that's if the frequencies are small enough. But if they're large, then you can, like a mouse, you can sneak around and you're not going to disturb the modes because you're small compared to that.
Goes around you like a
Right. Yes. Yes.
So you started with this example of the New York typical room layout.
Yeah.
And I was
Where's
in New
that?
York earlier this spring, and I was at the Carnegie Hall. I was blown away by the acoustics there. So what do they do for walls? Is it regular plaster? It's an old building, right? So have you been there? What can you comment on acoustics in Carnegie Hall?
They're pretty huge.
Well, of course.
I haven't been there and I haven't studied it. I've studied halls in general and I can comment in general. But yes, I know it's.
But the goals are quite different for a concert hall
Right.
and a listening space.
It's
It's not the
right.
same
The lifting
thing.
space is exactly true. Listening
When
space
you're trying
is
to
tiny.
amplify the other one, you're trying to listen to.
Well, yes, that's a start of it. What we're trying to do in a small room is get away from the concentration of energy in the room. The room is too small. Speakers put energy into the room, and the room stores it too long. And so what happens, instead of having a nice, fast tracking, dynamic timeline, pop, 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 it goes ba-da-la-la-la-la-la-la-la-la. You have no dB level change over time if the bass is stored. And that's what this is all about. And then what do we do about it? How do we get out from underneath that over-reverberation in the bass? And the over-reverberation takes place in two places. Down the length of the room, and that's what we're talking about now, and in the front of the room, which is where the sound is created, which is what we'll talk about next. So let's finish the rear wall so I can get out of the rear wall. Okay? So, okay, I can't even tell what that was. Oh yeah, bookcase. So a bookcase is free, and all you have to do is move it off the back wall. Here's a cool one. Rear wall. bookcase, bookcase. By the way, these are not made up examples. This room exists in Australia. Okay? These are real rooms, not make-believe rooms. These are all real rooms. I could probably tell you the name of the customer at the time. So, okay, the wavefront hits here, the records absorb some of the sound, vent, 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 vent. What he did is he put bass traps on the back of his, just bought big old bass traps and bolted them on the back of his record rack because, instead of, and he still had a hallway he could walk around. He wanted to listen with his door closed, so, but, it was a room and it had a door. And so, but he basically, moved these off the wall, gave enough room for the bass to go around either side, compress, and then he absorbed the compression part of the bass using pressure zone bass traps. Okay, is a wall a pressure zone bass trap? It's a kinetic energy bass trap. It's a velocity bass trap. It takes energy out of the movement of the air. It doesn't absorb pressure out of the. Usually, it doesn't absorb energy out of the pressure of the air. Okay, so I'm just, driving the point home. I guess I can quit. Okay, so now let's take a look at what bass traps do at the rear of the room. Again, we've got this big flat wave front, streaking down. Okay, and we have a few milliseconds to do something about it before it goes streaking back up the front of the room. And so typically, the first thing people do is GIK or ASC, whatever, XYZ, doesn't really matter. Everybody's making bass traps these days. So they put bass traps in the back corner of the room. And that leaves a huge wall like that. And here's the chair, and here's your phase add cancel, and your 50 hertz cut. And, okay, so that helped, but did it really help? I mean, some energy's out of the room, but not enough. So, you put one back here. Okay, well, if one's good, two's probably better. So put two there. And okay, so now what do you have? Well, now you have something that's starting to look familiar. This part of the wall suffers a direct impact, and it expands, but this is absorbing and this is absorbing, and so you get a bass wave that's been distorted and continues to expand like that. It's turning into a circulating bass wave, presto. That will disappear in short time. That's not our problem. Our problem is standing waves. Those are the ones we have to turn. Same thing here. Don't need to go over the details. Okay, so what else? A freebie. Anybody got a closet in your house? You have a bass trap of some sort, or a bass vent. So let's talk about closets and bass vents because they're fun. Okay, back of the room again. Okay, so I'm gonna so let's play like we have. I'll put one here. We have a closet, and we've got sliding doors, and we really don't want the wavefront to bounce off. And remember, got a giant street, it's like a locomotive coming down the room. We open this closet door to here, and guess what? This corner is vented, time delayed, comes back, put clothes in it, fill it up with stuff, cardboard boxes. I mean, have fun. And now we've vented and kind of made a little bass trap out of the closet. That's only on this side. What are you going to do here? Oh, well, call GIK or ASC or XYZ, buy a bass trap. Because you got no choice. Okay, let's take another closet.
So in a setup like this, does the range of frequencies affected by the closet, is that dependent on the size of the opening of the closet?
Not really.
The size of the closet itself?
That's too technical. I mean, you can engineer this thing to death. I'm trying to skim over the top.
Sure.
Bass will go through almost any kind of a crack. If it's a little crack, the air pressurizes and squeaks through quickly. If it's speeds up. If it's a larger crack, the pressure driving it isn't that hard, and it goes through leisurely. So, I mean, you can keep closing that thing down, and it's still leaking bass. It's just a high velocity. Right?
You might hear some cuffing out of it.
Yeah. And I mean, if it'll do it on your subwoofer, on your horn on your subwoofer, right? I mean, the port on the subwoofer, it'll might do it in your closet. Okay, here's another one. So let's say we have a closet here. Okay, so we have a choice. We can do it this way, or we can do it this way. No, we can't do it that way. Sorry. Or we can do it this way. Right? Because it's sliding doors, like those. And so this is an interesting one because it vents the corner, but it vents out here in the middle. So cool. We like this huge flat rear wall to get vented, and now we just snuck a vent. You could even say, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go like this, and because I want the middle to be more vented. So you can play around with it, and here's your listening chair, and you can open it and close it and fiddle with it and see what comes of it. But it's a way to vent. And don't forget, a hanging door, the bass is going to put pressure on it, and guess what pressure does to a hanging door? It doesn't weigh all that much, pushes it. So that's the new kind of vent, okay? Pushing the door. So this one's just air sloshing in and out, and this one here, the rest of this thing is a lightweight plastic door that is actually moving. Now it takes time to move things. They don't move as quick as air. And so when the bass pressure hits here, after a little while, the speed picks up and it moves this way. So now we have an out of phase movement. We've got in phase movement coming in here, out of phase movement coming in here. We've just created a very complicated thing, and we don't even know what it is or how it works, but it's scrambling up the bass, guaranteed, and that's what we want to do, is scramble the wave front. So this wave front's going to come off like this, nice and flat and hard, and who knows what it's going to come off over here, right? We've screwed with it. We vented it here, and we give it a flexible thing here, and whatever it is, give it a name. I don't know what it's called. You could say, oh, it's a membrane bass trap, and this is a vented bass trap. I don't know if it's 3D bass trap or not. We're not trying to absorb energy. We're trying to distort the waveform, the plane, which is trying to distort the shape of the wave front so that we cause the sound to go in a different direction. This sound is going straight back, and it's going to linger in the room. This sound's going to start scrubbing the walls of the room, and it's going to disappear quick. Same story over and over again. Rear wall story. Okay. Front wall's different. Getting close. Okay.
So a window can be a friend on the rear wall.
Oh yeah. Well, what's cool about windows is they reverberate, and gosh, having nice reverberation behind you is really nice. Okay, having it in front of you is horrible. Having it behind you is cool. It's like having the door open to the dining room. Okay, so so I think we have covered the rear wall good enough so that you have a feeling for rear wall and the tricks that are used. In addition to when and where do you have to put products. Now, if you don't have a closet, well, you say, oh man, I wish I had a closet. Well, build one. Oh, you can't build one. Oh, then you have to buy a bass drum. Well, I'll do that. And so, but you know, you don't have to if you happen to have the right arrangement. And you might have a closet, but it might be, you might have your speaker playing right next to your closet, and your closet needs to be at the back of the room. Maybe what you do is you turn your room around, play it properly. We talked about the back kind of half of the room. Now we're talking about the front. It's about 1/3 of the length of the room. In it is a speaker and a speaker. Whatever is going on in here, I'm going to make a little dotted thing, very similar to this nebulous, undefined concert hall kind of an idea. In other words, this is the listening environment. Right? We're not going to talk about it right now. We're just talking about the concert show, the launching of the wavefront. Whatever happens in here, you hear. Okay? Whatever happens here, you hear. If someone, okay, whatever happens, it doesn't even matter what it is, you will hear the effect of it happening here. And so what happens here is a big deal. Okay, why? Parallel walls, speakers between parallel walls, standing waves, standing waves, standing waves, energy stored, energy created, energy stored, staying. It's not even in the whole room. It's stuck in the front third of the room. The sound that's getting out is ricocheting around the room. Good riddance. The sound that's not getting out is still there. Okay? So it's still there, and because it's still there, when the speaker quits making sound, that tone, the room takes over and continues making that tone. Now you don't have any kind of dynamic control. As in, sound was loud, then it's supposed to get quiet, then it's supposed to get loud. We're supposed to be regulating how loud the sound is over time. And we can't regulate it if we've got a big reverb sitting out here in the front of the room. Dynamic smearing. Blur. Okay, here's the floor of the room. Here's the front third. And here's the speaker. And we have the same problem vertically. So, and guess what? We don't need this wall to have that problem. It still exists. If you pop a balloon, like I did a long time ago, in a car park, concrete, multi-story car park, okay? You got a slab of concrete above you, slab of concrete below, and 100% open walls all the way around you. It's like you were surrounded with wall panels, 100% wall panels all the way around. It's even better. It's air, right? There is nothing but a chain fence over here and over here, and the sound goes right through it. So it's 100% absorption in the horizontal plane and 0 absorption vertically. How long does the sound last? 2.5 seconds. That's the RT60. It's called RT60 is 2.5 seconds. You say, oh, gee, that's pretty awful. Okay, so you go into a 7-foot parking chamber and you say, oh, that ought to work better, maybe, or worse, I don't know. What's the RT60? 2.5 seconds. Go into a 12-foot parking structure and, oh, that'll be better, or maybe worse, I don't know. What is it? 2.5 seconds. Can't escape. It doesn't matter what the speed of the rattling back and forth is, it still dies down in 2.5 seconds. And a little formula that you can go through that explains it, and you say, oh, I could have thought of that. At any rate, but it almost defies intuition until you kind of get used to it. Sound between parallel surfaces lasts 2.5 seconds. Now those are large parallel surfaces. If we make the parallel surfaces small, well, sound between them, I mean, that'll last 2.5 seconds. The problem is the sound is leaking out of this thing and it's bleeding off as it's reflecting back and forth. It's bleeding off. And so it dies out quicker. But not because the vertical part got reduced by any trickery. It's just that it leaked out of the parking stall parking lot because this was only 3 feet in size and this is 3 feet in size instead of 300. And so it bled to death. And so I just had to throw that in case, because it's not, there's always a limit to how things work.
So non-parallel walls and ceiling and floor.
Well, floors are tough to stand on, but yeah, the punchline, the punchline is,
Ceiling, I mean, you're
yeah,
flat.
the punchline is that this is here's a dynamic speaker. We don't have this, basically ceiling, quote, walks the bass wave to the back of the room and changes the angle of it, and basically it starts rubbing on the rear wall, and maybe you've got some doorways and vents and stuff like that. But basically what we've done is we've escorted the bass, the unruly bass, out of the building. Okay? Well, some of us happen to have, in the recording studio business, that's called an expansion studio. Okay? Like half of them in the world are made this way. But most of our hi-fi rooms are made this way because they're not made dedicated. We inherit them. Some of them have sloped roofs, and those that do are lucky. Put your speakers under the low end of the roof, not the high end of the roof. But what if you can't? What if there's some reason that you can't do that? What if the ceiling is flat and there's no way you're going to get a tilt? Buy a dipole. Because does a dipole send any energy vertically? No. It's shorted out vertically. Dipole is a large sheet that just moves back and forth. It's not a positive pressure generator like a piston in a speaker cabinet that creates a spherical wavefront. It creates a plane wavefront. The wave goes this way, and a reverse phase wave goes this way, and nothing goes this way, nothing goes this way, nothing this way. In the plane of the speaker, nothing is transmitted. There's no sound transmitted.
Same way with the line source.
No. Dipole. No. Well, I can talk about that. But this is a dipole. If you if you stand at the side of a dipole outside, I can almost hear nothing. Walk around in front of it. Oh my God, is it really loud? Walk around to the side of it. Oh, what happened to the sound? I mean, you just don't hear it. Okay. The dipole does not transmit energy away from it in the plane of the speaker, which is really cool if you're stuck in a room where you can't stand the vertical reverberance, you can't afford the bass traps to get rid of it, there's no place to vent it, and you want to have great sound, change speakers. Good excuse.
There, I need.
Yeah, right. You're gonna. So it's really cool, and it's just amazing to think that you can actually solve your problem by buying a new set of speakers, which is exactly what you want to do anyway. But what you want to do is solve your problem by buying a new set of speakers, not just have the same old problem that you had with the last set of speakers. And if you don't buy the right kind of speaker to get you out of trouble, you'll have the same problem.
Do you get the same effect with open baffle speakers or just with the electrostatics?
Open baffle, okay, that would be pretty much the same as an electrostatic, except it's a very point source type of open baffle, but it still is shorted out in the plane of the driver. And I haven't studied this new generation of speaker, particularly the low frequency ones where it's got two drivers going back and forth in an open frame. So how do you guys do that, right? So
It's digitally corrected. That Siegfried did years.
Linguist is
Yeah.
fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Man, what a hero.
It's,
And, so
speakers are beautiful.
the other version of tilt is, okay, you've got a square room, and if you could build your walls kind of at an angle, guess what? And you put your speakers here, now your standing wave is no longer there, and you escort it to the back of the room where hopefully it's vented or turns into a scrubbing wave in some portion of it. And because you have created, even in a rectangular room, you can still angle some walls and create that effect. The acoustic angle of pleasure, of performance, is not an architectural angle of aesthetic agreeability. An acoustic angle is obnoxious. 10 degrees. Sorry. If you want it to work, 10-degree angle.
That's all you use is 10 degree, huh?
Well, you take a look at a 10-degree angle and you say, wait, I can't even walk in this room. Yeah.
Do you want them identical or do you want them 10 degrees?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
There's nothing magic about that. Anyway, 10 degrees. Okay, let's say that you have a room with a speaker, and you're not going to buy a dipole, but nobody's going to exactly be the boss of you too much if you could just come up with something that, just you kind of sneak it in. And, all you need is 8 feet. You'll be way in front of the speaker, and you'll be able to dump the vertical buildup of energy out of the front of the room.
So if you have a
10 degree,
10-degree angle.
So if you have the cathedral suit like I got, it's
You're in
14
trouble.
feet, my speaker's below it, so that's perfect, right? My room is a large room, I have like a 14-foot cathedral ceiling, my speaker's down below in the middle.
Well, it's a perfect room for dipole. It's an ugly room for dynamic. Well, you can fix it, but you have to roll up your sleeves and get some scaffolding out. You have to do something. Okay, and we can talk about pointed roofs, but yeah, because you're basically, here's his roof, and here's this, and here's the wavefront coming out of the speaker, and it is coming up like this, hits this wall, bounces back, hits this corner, bounces back. Same thing, the other speaker goes the other way. The mono bass part of it expands up, hits the ceiling, compresses. This is now a new corner in the room. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 corners instead of 4. And this is where, so you've got, not only do you have this flat wall reflecting and coupling to the speaker in this corner, but you have the vertical compressing into that. And the typical solution for that, out of desperation, is to install really huge bass traps up here. And now I haven't had anybody, drill holes in the roof and put rain caps on it, but I guess you could try that too. Okay, so we talked about. Here's the front of the room. Speaker. This speaker couples vertically, and it couples this way. This speaker is in the pressure zone so that it can couple to certain standing waves. This speaker is in a different potential pressure zone, and it can couple to other standing waves. And that one, this one. Anyway, so you have vertical standing waves, horizontal standing waves, and then diagonal, because a corner reflects directly back to where it came from. Corner reflects back to where, if you stand in a mirror in a bathroom that's got a corner mirror, stand there and look at yourself, and you say, boy, I haven't gotten any cuter in any amount of time. You move around, and your face continues looking at you, but it's a corner reflection, right? No matter where you are, it chases you around the room. And so, anyway, that's what corner reflections are also part of the standing wave situation. And, okay, so what we want to do is get rid of the standing wave, if we can, by slopes, or we have to add bass traps. So let's say, okay, we're going to add a bass trap. So we're going to, typical ASC version of a bass trap is floor to ceiling bass traps there and a floor to ceiling bass trap here. Now here's the plan view of the room. Speaker. The energy is actually building up in the plane of the speakers. 35 years ago, it all wasn't so clear. And 35 years ago, what we knew for sure is if you put bass traps in the corners behind the speaker, everything got a lot better, including the dynamic clarity, right? The speed that the sound level changes in the front of the room, which is what you hear at your listening position. It's not that you don't hear the direct. Of course you hear the direct, but you also hear the rest of the chaos that comes along with the direct, right? The direct arrives with a backpack these days. The backpack is all this garbage that is built up and lingering in the front of the rooms. And direct is, no one's got a problem with the direct. It's the baggage that spreads out over. Okay, so, but basically, we want bass traps in the plane of the speaker. Okay, so this wavefront travels this way. It's this bass trap that punches a hole in it. It comes back like this, punches a hole in it. When the hole is punched, what bounces off of this wall? Something that comes back like this, right? It's starting to go in different directions. When you punch a hole off of this flat wavefront, it comes off the wall, and yeah, this is kind of flat, but this is starting to bend. It's the same story over and over again. You either use absorption to bend the reflection of the bass wavefront, or you use venting to bend the reflection of the bass wavefront. It's kind of like your two tricks here.
So in that example, were you leaving the traps in the corners, or were you moving the traps from the corners?
Well, if you normally you start with the traps in the corners because it does so many things that these don't do, even though these are more directly in line.
So you was adding.
Right.
You were adding.
Yes.
Okay.
And
so presumably, if I was going to buy two, it's best to put them back in the corners.
Yeah, right.
And then the next ones
Would be in the plane of the
Thank you.
speakers.
Can you just talk about what toe-in does and placement from the sidewall and placement from the back wall? What does that do?
Okay.
Without doing anything else.
As far as bass is concerned, nothing. Because toe-in is about treble. And treble is, we've got this beam pattern, and all we're doing is changing the beam pattern. And usually we like to have the beam pattern start off with the speaker straight ahead, and it's not quite right. We start to toe it in a little bit until the high frequencies come in, imaging gets detailed, and then we stop. So usually we're not listening at 60 degrees or 70 degrees, ridiculous toe-in. The toe-in starts straight. That's how they always do it. I'm there. And so, but that has nothing to do with bass. Bass is omni. That means it goes in any direction, all directions, equal power, same time.
Crown molding will work for high frequencies, but not low.
So Harry Pearson had a rule of thirds for speaker placement.
Yes,
And is that relevant to anything that you're talking about?
absolutely.
So could you
It's-
just bridge the gap there for me?
Okay, so that's at the end of the talk, but I can do it now. And so, okay. But before we can talk about that, we have to understand modes, which we have a feeling for. Okay, so let's now get a little more specific about what a mode is. And I hope I'm not being derailed too much from where I was going, but it's still all part of what we're going to talk about. Here's a parallel wall and parallel wall. Okay, if I have pressure here, a standing wave means I have pressure on this wall, and it'll be positive pressure. And then in the middle of the room, I'm going to have air moving this way. I'll be a little more detailed in a second. And over here we have negative pressure. So we have, at a moment in time, we have positive pressure here. I'll draw a graph of this. At a moment in time, we have positive pressure here, nothing in the middle of the room, no pressure, and then negative pressure here. Half a cycle later, we have negative pressure in this part of the room, went from positive to negative, and okay, so the pressure oscillates from here to here to here to here. Sort of like if you have a tray of water or if you have a bathtub and you slosh it. It's the sloshing mode, so the water goes whoop, Now, if you put something in the middle of that tray as it's going, when the water's like this, that little stick is over here. And when the water gets flat, the stick is going really fast, and then the stick ends up over here. And so when the water's flat, the stick is moving. When the water's steep, the stick is displaced but not moving. The rule is average over time. Half of the energy is kinetic energy, half of it is potential energy. It's still a wave. Laws of nature hasn't changed, and except that in a standing wave, all of the energy of the wave is potential energy at one moment in time. A quarter of a cycle later, all of the energy of the standing wave is kinetic energy, like a swing, right? It's speeding very quickly, close to the ground. It gets up high, stops. Potential energy gets down to the bottom, has no more potential energy, but it has speed. Don't get in the way of it. Goes right. Kinetic potential is all over the world, is all over the place. Kinetic potential. So we have pressure differences, and then we have speeding velocity. Now, in order to create a standing wave, you have to have a pressure driver, something that makes pressure in a pressure zone. So I'm going to put a loudspeaker, because primarily what a loudspeaker does is make pressure. It's not very good about, I mean, it pushes a little air around, but it's mainly making pressure. This, put a loudspeaker here, it will stimulate a standing wave, because this is a pressure spot. Put the loudspeaker here, it won't create that standing wave. Because in order for this standing wave to exist, there has to be pressure and pressure and pressure and pressure. And this speaker over here can't figure out how to make alternating pressure on either side of, on either wall. That's the rule of thirds. Excuse me, that's the rule of thirds, only it's the rule of halves. Okay? The rule of thirds is the next harmonic up. But that's what this is about. If you put a driver in the kinetic energy zone of a standing wave, you cannot stimulate the pressure of that standing wave, because this is not a kinetic driver. This is a pressure driver. And in order to create pressure, you have to use a pressure drive at a pressure spot. Okay, so you got to get that clear. And then we go to the rule of thirds. Okay, so the rule of thirds goes like this. We have pressure. Okay, so now let's take a look at this. I hope we got to the rule of thirds. We have a quarter wavelength, a quarter wavelength, a quarter wavelength, a quarter wavelength. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so this is another harmonic. So this, how many? So this is the first harmonic. This would be, I guess, the second.
Well, the thing that you drew first was the first harmonic, and now we have a second harmonic.
Yeah. And if I put a speaker here, I can stimulate it, right? Because this is pressure zone. If I put a speaker in the middle of the room, it'll stimulate that one. If I put a speaker in this, next to this wall, it'll stimulate, because all of these are pressure zones. It doesn't care which spot I put a speaker in, it'll still stimulate the pressure zone. If I put a speaker here, it won't stimulate it, because the speaker is making pressure and it has to be making velocity in order to stimulate the standing wave. It can stimulate. What speaker makes kind of more velocity than pressure? Come on, there's only one left. No. Classic speaker. Dipole. Dipole is like a ribbon microphone. Dipole is a giant sheet of material that moves back and forth. It has positive pressure in front of it and negative pressure behind it, and that's almost a velocity source. It's a lot closer to a paddle shoving water around than a pressure pump compressing and expanding water. Okay? If you put a dipole speaker here, you can stimulate that standing wave as long as you're pushing air in the proper direction. If you put the dipole speaker this way, and the dipole's moving this way, well, that's not the direction the air is moving. The air is moving back and forth between these pressure points, and so the dipole has to be put here. So, is the rule of third an absolute rule of the God of acoustics, or is it just depends on what kind of speaker you have? Depends on what kind of speaker you have. So you can't just follow a rule. You have to understand how it works mechanically. And then you're not following a rule, you're just using common sense. But if you don't know what to do and you have a normal speaker, traditional, dynamic, then the rule of thirds goes good. Okay, so what is this? This is the rule of quarters, right? So at 25%, we can't have anything here, but at 25%, okay, of the distance. So we have a rule of halves for the first harmonic to not build the first. Now we have a rule of quarters to not build the second harmonic. Let's do the rule of thirds. Okay, the rule of thirds, you think I can draw this? So I have to have a pressure zone there and a pressure zone there, and so it's going to look like. Did I do it? Yes. Okay, so now.
It's the same drawing as we have.
You better not be.
No.
I've got two.
Opposites. Sorry. That should be at the wall.
This is at the wall. This is at the wall. So now I've got this distance. So where's a third? So here's a third. Okay? So why would I put a speaker? I can put a speaker here and create pressure. I can put a speaker here and create pressure, here and create pressure, and here and create pressure. So why do we have a rule of thirds that looks like that? This isn't, so I'm not saying there's something wrong. I'm saying there's something wrong in the explanation. Yes. Oh, we're out of time? Rats. Okay, let's do the rule of thirds. I just wanted to make sure that, okay, the first harmonic looks like this. The second harmonic looks like does it do that? I don't think so.
It's one whole wave all the way across.
Let's see. That looks like a full wave all the way across. Okay. If I'm in the middle, this is the length of the room. Here's the speaker. We're trying to figure out where to put the speaker. And here's the length of the room. And here's our chair. Okay? We don't want to put the speaker here on the wall. We could put the speaker in the middle of the room, technically, and not stimulate the long dimension of the room, but that doesn't work. If we, and plus that stimulates the second harmonic. So we start moving back, and when we get to a third, we take a look and see what we've got. We're stimulating a little bit of the fundamental, not a lot, because we're quite a ways away from the wall, and we're still stimulating a little bit of the second harmonic. And at 30%, 30. In our I do it for the first three harmonics, not the first two, but I do it for the first three harmonics, and it's 29%. Well, 29%, golden rectangle. I mean, there's all different versions of it, but they all end up at around 0.3, 1/3. So, and plus you get there, and then you still have to move back and forth and dial it in. But basically, you're getting to a spot where you minimally stimulate the first, second, and possibly even the third harmonic of the room, because you're putting that pressure generator as far away as you can get it from any pressure zone. That's the rule of thirds. It's a good one, and ASE has its rule of thirds too. It's kind of quite the same, but it was all based on the same idea.
Just a very quick question, maybe an aside. Do we hear pressure or we
Pressure.
hear pressure? So if you're sitting in the middle of the room, you're never going to hear that first harmonic.
Yes.
First standing wave.
Standing.
Thank you.
here. Ask him to do it, you just do it twice.
Oh, no.
Thank you.
Thank you very much
Yeah,
for
so-
coming and always.
Thank you.